小枇杷是唯一一家全美发行的中文儿童杂志，面向全世界以中文为非主要学习语言的少年儿童，至今已有10年历史，陪伴了一代华裔孩子成长。读者遍布全美，并覆盖到加拿大、澳洲、欧洲、亚洲10几个国家。小枇杷致力于出版高质量的中英文读物，提倡亲子阅读，以在美国传播中国文化、改善华裔家庭2代间沟通交流、提高华裔儿童自信为宗旨，在传播中国文化的同时，贴合北美儿童实际情况。从2020年开始，小枇杷开设网上中文课程小枇杷云课堂，提供从学龄前到14岁5个级别的中文课程，以文化中文课为特色，精读和辅导课的形式，对学生进行有趣有益的互动教学。云课堂的2023年春季招生已经开始了，欢迎大家添加小枇杷云课堂的客服，预约免费试课。关注我们的微信公众号可以获取一手资讯。另外，我们呢最近也刚刚开通了小红书，欢迎大家关注。今天我们有幸邀请到了一位非常独特的主讲人 Alan 潘。我相信在座有很多朋友是通过他动人的文笔认识他的。他介绍绘本《亲爱的爸爸》的2篇微信文章，每篇都有2万多的阅读量，展现了文字和真情的力量。Alan 是大华府地区一位12年级的高中生，一直热爱中英文写作和绘画。小年纪已经是一位有着丰富写作和出版经验的创作者了。17岁的他已经出版了9本中英文书，包括《外星人交友指南》、看漫画学英语、《亲爱的爸爸》和《好牙成长记》，获得了读者的广泛好评。Alan 在2019、2020和2021年连续3年获得 Scholastic Art and Writing Awards 国家级金奖和银奖，并在2020年获得 One Earth 特别奖。美国学术艺术和写作奖 Scholastic Art and Writing Awards 是为7到12年级的青少年设立的美国高含金量竞赛之一，是美国规模最大、历史最悠久、最负盛名的文学和艺术竞赛。好，今天呢，我们非常有幸的邀请到了 Alan 同学作为我们今天的主讲人。我们请 Alan 打开你的摄像头，跟大家打个招呼好吗？
大家好，我就是 Alan。今天很荣幸能在这里跟大家做这个讲座。我在开头就是先拿中文介绍一下自己，然后这个讲座会是用英文讲的，最后还会有个提问环节，就是如果大家英文不太熟练的话，也可以拿中文提问，就是中英文都可以。好，那我们今天要讲的这个讲座内容是 Read, Write and Publish， 主要介绍一下我个人写作、绘画和出版的经历，也会教大家就是如何自己出版一本书。All right, read, write, and publish. So today I will tell you about my journey with learning 2 languages. Learning 2 languages, writing my own books and illustrating them, and how I got through the entire process of publishing. All right, so here's the agenda for today. First, I will introduce myself and my background. Then I will talk in depth about how I learned both English and Chinese and how they both became my native languages. And then my experience with writing and illustrating. Finally, I will talk about what you're probably most interested in today, about publishing, and then also show you a few examples of what my books look like. And then finally, we'll have a round of questions and comments. All right, so here's my background. As you can see, I started out at a small elementary school in Liyang, stayed there until 3rd grade. Then I went to Oat Hill Elementary School in Herndon, Virginia for 1 year. And then the year after that, I went back to Wuxi. Then I went to Nanjing for 2 years for the final 2 years of my elementary school education. Then after that, I went to Nanjing Foreign Language School. It's a pretty competitive middle school in China, if you know about it. And then for high school, I first went to Lincoln East High School in Nebraska, which I think is a pretty interesting experience. And then finally, now I'm here in Northern Virginia, close to DC. I'm studying at McLean High School. All right. And throughout this experience, I learned English, Chinese, and French mostly by myself, and I will tell you how I did it. Okay, so here's how I learned Chinese. Because I spent so much time in China, I think it's reasonable to see how Chinese became my native language. But I think the most important thing that really helped me through this process is a lot of reading. I know that people, especially in classes in school, people like to read one thing very, very carefully, and you'll take maybe a few weeks or even months to get through one specific book or one specific article to really analyze like everything in there. But I think if you are starting out learning a language, what's most important is to read lots of books. So I think this is a unique case where I think quantity is worth more than quality, because when you see the same characters over and over again many times, then you'll slowly grow more accustomed to it and you'll get more used to using them in daily life. That's something only experience can get you, at least for my case it was. And I think that's something you can't really get out of reading one thing very specifically. So I read a lot of books since I was very young. For example, down here, there's this series of books by Richard Scarry. Then there's this series about a little chicken. And then over here, it's The Cat That Lived a Million Times, and then A Donkey Who Turned into a Stone. I think that the morals of these stories are pretty good and the contents are really interesting, especially for young kids. So those are some books that I've read and I would definitely recommend if you're interested in learning Chinese or if your child is. So here I'm emphasizing the importance of reading a lot, and because in Chinese it's very important to know a bunch of characters, you can mark out the ones that you know or don't know, and then as you read more and more, you'll start to see them over and over again in different cases, and you'll generally start to understand what exactly they mean in all these contexts. I would say that proficient reading for Chinese starts at around 800 characters. I've tried with 100 characters making up a couple sentences or stories, and that seemed pretty hard because you're just so limited by the lack of words that you can use. So I would say that a little bit further up there at 800 characters, you can slowly start to piece things together and make some stories. You can read most things proficiently, even if there are some things that you don't know. And I think that after all this reading, the writing also really helped. I wrote over 700 blogs on Weibo in first grade. You know, the little pieces of text, just 140 characters per blog. I wrote about 2 of these every day, and then I ended up with over 700 just in first grade. And even though the contents weren't very interesting, sometimes it's just things like, I saw an earthworm today, or the food I had was really good. Stuff like that. I think it's pretty mundane, but it did help me a lot, just exercising that kind of writing skill. Right, so that's how I learned Chinese. Next, we can take a look at how I learned English. I think this might be a bit more interesting because I didn't spend a lot of time in the US before I started high school, right? I only spent pretty much 1 year when I was here in 3rd grade. And I think the majority of the English learning that I did on my own. And I didn't really go to any summer camps or after school classes that would help me learn English. Mostly I just did it on my own. I'm not a kind of person who enjoys these extra classes. So you'll begin to see later in this presentation that a lot of things I do, I just figure out on my own. So how I learned English, again, is the same thing. I read a lot. I read the Harry Potter series and the Percy Jackson series. I think a lot of people here might have read them when you were young. Maybe you really liked them. I know I did. So I read those when I was around maybe the ages of 10 to 12. I definitely didn't understand everything in them. I think probably about 20% of the vocabulary I just didn't know, but Again, that shows the importance of reading lots of different things, because even though you might not know this word the first time you see it, the next time you see it in another context, and the next time you see it in another context, you'll slowly begin to realize, maybe this is what it means. And I think that's more effective than, flipping through the dictionary every time you run into something that you don't know. I'm not sure who's. Okay, now it's gone. All right, and then, yeah, someone said they read Wonder. I think Wonder is genuinely a really good book. If you haven't read it before, you definitely should. I read it in 5th grade, I think. I think the vocabulary is relatively easy for that one. So, if you have younger kids, you can definitely recommend it to them as well. I'm pretty sure Wonder is a whole series of different perspectives. So that's definitely one thing that you can explore if you're interested in learning English. And yeah, Percy Jackson is great. I kind of got into Greek mythology because of that. And I also tried learning Greek on my own for a while. It was kind of hard because Greek uses a different alphabet, but yeah, it really piqued my interest for learning languages. And if you don't like, these long chapter books, then you can I also highly, highly recommend these two on the left. They're both by a person called Shel Silverstein. So the first one, Falling Up, they're both just limerick collections. Limericks are like short poems. I think the stuff that he writes is genuinely pretty funny. And they also really sparked my interest for writing my own poems that you'll see later on in this presentation. But The Giving Tree, most of you probably know about it. It's about how the tree keeps giving different things to a kid. And it kind of represents, the love your parents have for you. You've probably seen it somewhere before in some form. So that's one thing that Shel Silverstein has written. And then he also has poem collections like this one, Falling Up. He has A Light in the Attic, which is another collection. Where the Sidewalk Ends. I can't think of many others off the top of my head, but if you're interested, you can search up Shel Silverstein, and he has a bunch of these collections that I've all finished. I think they're really funny, and it's like a very nice short read if you don't want to get into something too complicated, but you still want to, have fun, learn English. Oh yeah, Runny Babbitt is one. So there are lots of different Shel Silverstein books that you could get into. And of course, if you're more interested in like these longer stories, Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, Wonder. If you're aiming for a more advanced level, I would say Everything I Never Told You by Celeste New and Little Fires Everywhere are really good books that I read in high school. But those are for more advanced learners. All right, so here you'll see the fun poems that I did when I was 12 after I read Shel Silverstein's poems. I had a whole phase when I was 12 just writing up poems every day. I can't say for sure how good they are, but I definitely had a lot of fun writing them. For example, this one down here, the one called Socks. You say you've lost your socks again, good Lord knows where they went. But I rather suspect, if you'd closely inspect, that the dryer hasn't eaten them in the event. I don't know if the words are too small for you, but that's what the poem says. It was really just an excuse I made up because my mom kept complaining about how my room is too messy and I can't find any of my things. So I was like, oh no, I didn't lose them. The dryer ate them. So yeah, I definitely had a lot of fun writing those poems. And if you read Shel Silverstein before, you can probably tell that these are like super inspired by him. They're very similar in style. All right, that's my writing from when I was young. And then here are also some of my writing awards. So the first one that I ever got was the PBS Writers Contest when I was in 3rd grade, I believe. So when I was here in Herndon. It's a small writing competition for really young kids. I think it's from kindergarten to 3rd grade, I believe. So I entered that contest. I wrote like a really tiny book about what would have happened after the happy ever afters of the fairy tale Snow White and Cinderella. So I wrote that kind of a little brainstorm story, and then I got honorable mention, which I was super happy about. And then after that, after high school started, I started competing in more prestigious competitions, notably the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards. So I got a national silver medal in 2019 and 2021, and then a national gold medal in 2020. The national medals, I believe there are around 900 entries that receive a national medal each year. And then total, there are 300,000 entries to the awards each year. So it's like a 0.3% kind of thing. I wasn't really going into the competition expecting to get anything. Honestly, I wasn't even preparing specifically for the competition. I just wrote stuff because I thought it was fun. And then I read about this competition. I was like, oh, sure, I'll just submit it. And then I ended up getting awards. So I just kept doing it every year. And I found that pretty cool. Then I also got the One Earth Award in 2020, which is a special award, also categorized in the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards. It's given to 4 people nationally for writing about something related to climate change. So I also received that in 2020, which was a very pleasant surprise. And then apart from those, I also have a couple state awards, which I didn't list here. And of course, most of my awards are for writing, but I also did receive a few for art. I think that art is definitely, you require a professional teacher, I think, more so than creative writing for drawing. As you can see, I drew these 2 on the left. I think the one on the top got an honorable mention and the one on the bottom got a silver key. If you've been to the awards before, you probably know what these are. These are just state awards. Those are 2 pieces of art that I did, but the majority of the things that I work on are still writing. Right, and here you can see again some very unprofessional bits of art I did. The one on the left is a lamp, and then I thought it looked too ugly, so I decided to paint it, and the finished product is what it looks like on the left. Then on the right, I also bought these 3 little people that you hang on the wall in case you want to like hang your keys or your coat when you come in the door. So I bought these little people, and then I thought they looked kind of boring, so I drew like the jail suits on them. So it looks like they're trying to, escape from jail. It's just these funny little things that I do sometimes. Definitely not like super noteworthy, but it's just an example of how art can be super fun if you really enjoy the process. And then here are some things that I did digitally. So all of these I drew on my iPad. I think these are drawn anywhere from 8th grade to now. So quite a big time gap. And then as you can see, it doesn't require a whole lot of skill. I never really took art classes, so I just kind of guessed my way through it. But over here, there are some little comics that I drew. For example, here on the bottom, this is one about the dryer thing, because I keep making up excuses for losing my socks. And then on the right, bottom right over here is a small comic that I drew to represent the idiom "call it a day." And I'll also get more into why I drew out these comics for idioms later on. So yeah, those are some digital art pieces that I drew. And I think that they definitely paved the way for me to illustrate my own published books later on. Right, so here's what I was talking about the whole cartoons with idioms. I actually have about 50 of these on my WeChat blog, if you're interested. It's called English with Ellen, if you want to search it up. Those are dated a bit farther back, but basically I'd occasionally draw one of these little comics for an idiom. If you are not a native English speaker, you might not know what they mean. For example, the elephant in the room, what does that mean? I'll draw a literal representation of the elephant in the room, and then I'll explain its origins and what it actually means, how to use it in a conversation. So I make one of these little blogs on WeChat every once in a while. And then over here on the right, beggars can't be choosers. I also drew one for break a leg, which was pretty interesting. I just drew a person breaking another person's leg with a baseball bat. But yeah, I draw a lot of like these funny little cartoons. And then on the bottom here, we have the AHA blog. If you have Instagram, you can go check it out. There's not a whole lot of stuff on there right now, but I'll add more in the future. And this is for more STEM focused people. If you like calculus for whatever reason, or chemistry especially, or biology, I draw a lot of little comics, just personifying them. So if you're interested in that, definitely also go check it out. But this is just a quick demonstration of how you can make art fun even if you don't, take super professional classes. All right. And then now we're going to move on to publishing. So as you can see, I've published quite a few books. It's 9 in total, combined with the Chinese and French translations. So here you can see my authors page on Amazon. If you visit it, this is what you'll see. Here I have a couple books all listed there. Then over here is my profile picture, I guess. So this is what your profile will look like if you do publish books on Amazon. And then I'll talk in depth about a few of the books that I've published, my process of creating them, and what you can do to do the same thing. So here's my first book ever, A Journey to Perfect Teeth. I started this in 7th grade because I was wearing braces at the time. And if you've ever had braces before, it really restricts a lot of things that you do. For example, you can't bite on very hard things because it breaks your braces. You can't eat gum. You have to brush your teeth like 18 times a day. I was really annoyed by that. So I decided to, illustrate and write this book on why it's important that you have good dental hygiene and why everyone should have, why people should have braces, even though we all hate them. And I started this first in 7th grade. As you can see, here's some progress pictures. Over here is the first one that I ever drew. You can see it's not very good. And then here is a cover in progress. And over here on the right is the final product. So that's what you'll see if you go to my Amazon page and see my book right now. This is what the first of my illustrations look like in 7th grade. Of course, I've improved a lot since then. So here's what they look like now. And I also actually added more professional text so that it looks more decent. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of work that goes into this. I would say that the hours I put into this whole book is, let's say, upwards of 100 just total. But I would say most of the hours were spent on actually trying to format the book and trying to get it through Amazon, which I will also talk about later because that was a real hassle for me when I first tried it. Right, so you can see here, this is the final product of my book. The illustrations look a lot nicer and the text does as well. And then here is the second book that I wrote called An Alien's Guide to Friendship. This was a bit interesting because I actually co-authored it with a bunch of my students. I teach English creative writing and public speaking classes to some very young students. And I had them build a story together, which eventually became An Alien's Guide to Friendship. So you can see like over here at the bottom of the cover, there are multiple names. That's because there were multiple authors. So me and 5 students. I also helped them illustrate some. And I actually have a copy here. You can see it's a hardcover. It's pretty nice. You can see on the inside too if you want. Oh. Yeah, so that's the size of the book, which I will tell you in more detail about in case you want to publish one. But that's my second book. And then after that, I published a few more, such as Learn English with Cartoons. Earlier, I mentioned my WeChat blog where I post all these idioms. So I combined them together. There are 50 in total, I believe, and I turned them into this little booklet. It's mostly in Chinese, but I explain how to use these English idioms with English examples as well. So if you are interested in reading them all at once, you can also check out that book on Amazon. All right, and then here's my latest book, Dear Dad. So this was written in memory of my dad who passed away in 2019. So I wrote and illustrated this book as well. The style is a little bit different. It's more of a watercolor kind of style. And I'm actually doing a Christmas sale kind of event for this book. So if you see these pictures and you're interested, then I will have a link at the end of this presentation for you to check it out. All right, and then this is my first book called The Missing Pages of Snow White and Cinderella. It looks kind of terrible because I drew it when I was 8, And this is actually the illustrations that I used for my writing for the PBS Writers Contest that I mentioned earlier in 2013. So you can see that my illustrations kind of have come a really long way. And I'm pretty surprised actually, because I can see like a lot of improvements, even though I've never really had a teacher. So, right. So now we'll start talking about the steps to publish your book. This is the general process that I use to publish most of these books. And it's actually quite easy. If you're interested in publishing, you can take a look at this. So first, number one, of course, you have to write your book. I think this took quite a long time for me just to get the idea and wrap up the illustrations to make sure they all look nice, including the formatting. So writing the book, if you have that down, then step number two is you register an account from kdp.amazon.com. KDP stands for Kindle Direct Publishing. So that's the platform on which you will be publishing your book so that people can find them on Kindle Store and then on Amazon. All right, and then the third part is buying your ISBN. If you're going the Amazon route, so there are two main options that you can choose. First one is you use a free ISBN from Amazon. An ISBN is just like you can see here, for example, on this book, there's a barcode over here. That's the ISBN. It's what people use to identify your book, why it's different from another one. And ebooks, even if they have the exact same content, ebooks and paperbacks and hardcovers, they will all have different ISBNs. So that's what they use to identify your specific book. And then translated versions will also have different ones. So if you want to not pay for it, then you can get one from Amazon. They give it to you for free. But there's a downside that people will only be able to find your book on Amazon. So you can still print it and everything, and you can find it in ebook format, but it won't be able to go into libraries. It won't be able to go into bookstores, such as if you want to sell your book to Barnes and Nobles, for example, they won't take it because the ISBN only works for Amazon. So that's the Amazon exclusive ISBN. It is free. So if you're just doing it as a hobby, then I would recommend that. And then the other option is to buy one from Bowker. Bowker is the only company in the US that sells ISBNs. So this is different from Amazon. You will be able to give your book to libraries. For example, a couple of my books are in the local library system. They're in bookstores, and this is only achievable with a Bowker ISBN. And these you do have to pay for. One ISBN is $125. 10 is $295, 100 is $575. So you can see they definitely, each of them get cheaper as you go on. And if you want to buy 1,000, so that's a big publishing company, you can buy 1,000 ISBNs for $1,500. So if you want to publish multiple versions of a book, as I said earlier, because you have to use different ISBNs for example, ebook and hardcover, you have to use different ones. So I would recommend getting a couple extra if you want to do it more professionally. Personally, I bought 100 ISBNs because I published quite a few in multiple formats, and then I also have translated copies. So I definitely needed more. So it's really up to your personal preference how many you want to get. And then finally, step 4. You upload your files and publish the book. This is pretty self-explanatory. If you go to KDP, they will give you a form. And on the form, you just fill things out like, what is the name of the author? Are there any co-authors? What's the title or subtitle of your book? You pick the categories that you want it to be in. And then after that, you just publish it, and then people will be able to find it on Amazon. All right, so those are the 4 essential steps for publishing. Now, if you want to publish this book in a physical copy, so hardcover or paperback, you will have to worry a bit more about your book size and the actual physical restraints of this. You don't have to worry about this really if you're publishing an ebook, but the size of your book. So here I have Dear Dad. This is a 8.5 by 8.5 inch. So looking at the size, if you think that's pretty good, then that's what you can design your book to be. So this is 8.5 by 8.5, and then 6x9. I don't have a copy here, I believe, but it's a bit smaller. And I use that for Learn English with Cartoons. If you saw it earlier, it kind of, it's this shape and it's a bit smaller than Dear Dad I just had. And then over here, I also have a much larger one, An Alien's Guide to Friendship, because this one has Chinese translations at the bottom, so I needed to make it bigger. And you can see the comparison with Dear Dad. It has a bit more at the top. All right, so that's for book size. Again, it's really personal preference, what you want it to be. And then if you're publishing this as a physical copy, you also need to remember to add bleed. All right, so the bleed is usually 0.125, so 1/8 of an inch additional from your original and what your original cover looks like. So this is the part where I actually had the most problem when I was publishing my books, because Amazon kept saying, no, you don't have enough room on the edges. So make sure that you leave enough room there so that your book can pass the inspection and get published. Right. And then for actually making the file, so after you write the book and you got the illustrations and everything, I use PowerPoint to make my book. So I just download the images to my computer. I draw them digitally, so I just export what I drew onto my computer and then paste them into PowerPoint. And then I will use a text box on PowerPoint to add the text. And you can see here, I'll show you an example of Dear Dad. For example, this is a page that I drew. And then I essentially pasted this image into PowerPoint. So all the background stuff and the drawings are done digitally. And then over here, I put in a PowerPoint text box and just wrote the text on top. I would recommend you do this instead of putting the text inside your picture, because that way, if you find an error, it's a lot harder to change it. And there are lots of different fonts to pick from in PowerPoint too, so lots of freedom. So that's how I did it. And then when I finished, I just used the convert to PDF option and then exported that PDF file and uploaded it to Amazon. So that's what I would suggest. It's pretty self-explanatory, pretty easy process. I haven't found any problems with it so far, so I would definitely recommend that. So if you want to illustrate your own book, which I did for all of mine, I would recommend Medibang and Procreate. So Procreate is used for Dear Dad. You could see earlier here that it's more of watercolor kind of illustration. The pros to Procreate is that you have a lot of different brushes that you can choose from. So that's how I got the watercolor effect. It's really good for using really vibrant colors if you're interested in that. And then Medibang is what I use for all my other books. So you can see the little drawings that I had in Learn English with Cartoons are more cartoonish, I guess, more clear lines. So those are drawn in Medibang. And Procreate costs $10. It's not a subscription, so you can just buy it once and use it forever. And the Medibang is free. So it really depends on how much you're willing to spend and what kind of style you want for your book. Again, it's up to your preference. So for the illustrations, I had these apps, and what I used was an iPad and an Apple Pencil. You could also use a tablet with a computer, but an iPad is just what I prefer. So you don't need like super fancy equipment, and that should be enough for illustrations. And then there are also options if you aren't interested in illustrating your own book. Right. So if you don't know how to draw, if you don't want to, then you can use Canva. This is not an ad. It's not an ad or anything. I just genuinely think it's pretty useful. For example, you can see that my slides here are also in Canva, and they have like really cool animations and stuff. So Canva, you can see all these images on the right here are from Canva. It's free. You don't have to pay anything to get these images. And if you want to make a book, using these pictures, then you definitely can. I think that's the best tool I've used out there that offers you like these free images. And then you can also use something called Creative Fabrica. It costs a little bit of money, so it's not completely free, but it does give you a lot of different textures. So I can show you here. If you can see A Journey to Perfect Teeth, the wooden floor over here, that's a texture that I got from there. And then you can't really see, but there's kind of like a textile texture to the blue background, which I also got from there. So Creative Fabrica is more for if you want different textures. Right, and those are just some apps that you can use. Of course, I illustrate my own stuff, so I don't look too deep into these things. But if you're interested, you can definitely go explore some more. These are just the two that I find most useful. All right, and then you also have to make a cover for your book if you're going to publish it in a physical copy. So for an ebook, obviously you just have front cover on the first page, back cover on the last page. But if you actually have to print it, then it's a bit different. So you can see here, it's kind of if you lay your book out flat on the desk, that's what you would look like, and that's what you have to design. So for a longer book, A Journey to Perfect Teeth is 67 pages, so it's relatively long for a picture book. That means it's going to be thicker, so you have to have a spine. And you can see this little middle row down the center of this image is just the title of my book, and then the author name down the spine. So that's something you can put there if your book is thick. Compared to Learn English with Cartoons, that one's shorter, so I didn't put anything on the spine because it wouldn't fit. So this is the format for your cover. Preferably, just for aesthetic purposes, the two parts of your covers should link together. It shouldn't be like broken apart. And you have the front cover on the right and the back cover on the left, and you have your ISBN there at the bottom. And then similarly, just like you uploaded your book file to KDP, you also have to upload a PDF of your cover file there. So the actual contents of your book and the cover file are two different things, and you need to upload them separately. Right. So apart from KDP, there are also other similar sites that you can use to publish your book. For example, for A Journey to Perfect Teeth, I used Ingram Spark. It's slightly different from Amazon. You need to pay $50 to publish a book. So it's definitely more expensive, but they partner with a lot of bookstores, and they will help you get your book to more places than you probably would be able to on your own. So Ingram Spark will help you get your book to bookstores. That's how my book is on the Barnes & Noble's website. And they also have a lot of partnerships with smaller bookstores, so like local places. If you're interested in getting your book to a really wide audience, then you can definitely try Ingram Spark. Lulu is similar, but it doesn't require any money. So I also have here it's not really a book, but it's like a photo album that I made on Lulu. And of course, there are many other websites, but I'd say Ingram Spark and Lulu are the ones that I did try out, and I say they're pretty popular. So if you're looking for something that will get you to a wider audience, then definitely try those. And of course, they have a lot of different options for you. They have stuff like normal paper, premium paper, ultra premium paper. I'd say so far the quality that I've got are all pretty good. So I would recommend those two if you don't want to go through Amazon. All right, so what can you do now if you haven't written a book, or if you just don't want to? What can you do with this information? Well, just like I did, you can make a photo album for a family. I would say it's a lot cheaper than actually getting your album made at like a professional album, like a specific album making place. So essentially, it's the same thing. You upload your pictures to PowerPoint or whatever you prefer to use, export it as a PDF, and you upload it to, I did Lulu. So you upload it to Lulu, you pick the type of paper that you want. For example, over here, I used premium paper with a soft cover. So you can see it's not like a hard cover like this one. But again, it's up to you what you want. 44 pages for this one album, and it cost me around $10. So this is definitely very, very cheap for a photo album. And if you want to change it to hardcover, then it would cost like $20, which is still really cheap. So as you can see over here on the right, I have a few example covers. I also made them in Canva. Again, not an ad, just I think it's pretty good if you don't want to like format things yourself. You can go to Canva to make this kind of cover, and then you just upload it to Lulu, and then you'll be able to make your own photo album. It also ships pretty quickly. I got mine within a week, so it will be, or at least I think they ship relatively quickly. So it's a pretty good option if you don't want to like write anything or illustrate anything. You can still make albums with these. And an additional thing is choose print only, so no distribution. This way you are the only person that will get your family album. I think it'd be a bit weird if everyone on the internet started buying your own photo albums. So make sure you choose that. But that's essentially everything I have for today. Earlier I mentioned if you want to purchase Dear Dad, which is my newest book, we have a sale event going on currently. So if you use WeChat and you want to know what the sale is like, then you can scan this QR code to join the chat and see what's going on. Or if you want to only buy 1 or 2 copies, you can also visit my Amazon link on the right. And that would be where you can purchase individual copies of my book. Here's the Amazon link that just goes to my author's page. So there are a couple books in there that you can look at. There's Dear Dad, and then Dear Dad in the Chinese translation version. So depends on which one you want. All right, so that's everything about my books. If you're interested in the competition, so the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards, I don't know how many of you are in high school or have kids in high school. It's open to grades 7 to 12. And the fee, I believe, for submitting each entry is $10. It used to be $7, but this year is $10. And you can virtually submit anything. They have over 20 categories for writing and for art. So there's stuff like sci-fi. That's what I submitted to mostly. There's sci-fi, fantasy, personal memoir. There are critical writing, like essays, if you're more interested in that. And then for art categories, there's also like a lot of things like painting, drawing, film, digital art, sculpture. There are so many categories that you can pick from. So don't worry about like something you're submitting not fitting a category. And then it's open to everybody who is, within grade 7 to 12 and also living in the US. You have to be attending a US school. So like you have to be within the US. If you're a citizen, but you live in like China, then you can't attend. So specifically only open to the US. So also, unfortunately, not open to places like Australia and New Zealand. But if you do live in the US, you're within these grades, or you know someone who does, definitely submit to these contests. It's how I got into this, honestly. It's just that I wrote stuff on my own randomly, and then I heard about this, so I was like, why not submit it? So, you never know what happens. Maybe you'll end up getting a cool medal, like I did. So that's about the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards. And that's pretty much all I have for this presentation. One like very tiny little thing is you can also make low content books if you want. This is a planner that I made for the year 2023. It's super big, but this is called a low content book because there's not much stuff in it, unlike even picture books or storybooks. You can see in here that it's just blank pages with dates on them. So if you want to make a low content book, it's pretty easy as well. Just follow the same steps that I told you before. Then you can honestly even download templates from online if you want, if you don't want to like format the whole dates thing yourself. But yeah, that's one other use for this publishing thing. You can also make low content books. So that's all I have for now. Does anyone have any questions? You can use the raise hand feature.
好，谢谢 Alan。现在我会把 chat 打开，然后大家可以在 chat 里面留言。如果想要提问的同学呢，请用Zoom 下面的这个 reaction， 然后点开有 raise hand。
Okay, we have a couple raised hands, so I'll just go one by one. We'll go with Kathy first.
Hi, just now you mentioned two software or two apps for drawing pictures besides the cool one. So you said something like P or M. Can you type out chat? Thanks.
Yeah. So
and also can you put out your WeChat link so we can follow you or ask questions? Thanks.
Yes, sure. So
yeah, you mentioned you also having a class teaching lower grade students. So I'd like to know more about that information as well. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so the class information, I'll just paste these here as well so you can all see them on one slide. For the class information, most things I have on Instagram, I have on WeChat under English with Ellen. So over there, you'll find like lots of posts. Some of them are like these idiom things, some of them are about my classes, when they start, the costs and everything are related. So if you're interested in that, then you can definitely just go follow my blog for any updates. The current semester that I have with my students is almost ending. I think it ends in like 2 weeks. So I'll be starting another semester, I think around maybe January or February. So if you're interested in that, then you can definitely do that. I'm having some trouble typing, so give me a minute. And then the other question that Kathy asked was about the two apps that I use. So they're called Procreate and Medibang. So there's Procreate, which costs $10, but you have a lot of different brush options, and they have super cool Procreate if you want to make like more detailed drawings with different brush strokes. That will definitely give you like more creative options. And the Medibang is free. It's more for cartoony styles, and it has fewer brushes. So those are the main differences that I can think. Let me scroll up to see other questions. Sorry, if you're raising your hand, I might miss you because I'm looking at the chat right now. So you're writing 2 books with your sister? That sounds great. I hope everything goes well for you. What free programs do you recommend for digital art? The one that I've been using for like the past 6 years is just Medibang for free. So that's the top one that I would recommend. Drawing tools, I used to use that was a very, very long time ago when I was in 5th grade. I used to use a Wacom tablet. They have lots of different options. Some of them are like hundreds of dollars, others are 50. So you can check them out on Amazon. That's the tablet it comes with a stylus and a tablet that you can plug into your computer. So if you want to use your computer, or if you don't have an iPad, then you can use that. If you have an iPad, then Procreate is specifically for the iOS system. So you can't find it on like Windows, unfortunately. But if you do have an iPad, then I would recommend Procreate. Where do you recommend publishing web comics? I know a lot of people who make comics do it on Instagram. It's kind of unpredictable because you never know who's going to see your comics or how many people. But yeah, I definitely do know a lot of people who draw comics that are on Instagram. And then for more professional stuff, I don't really draw a lot of comics outside of WeChat and the AHA blog. So sorry, I can't really answer that. I would say Patreon. So Patreon is kind of a subscription service. If you get a group of people that really, really like your comics, you can open a Patreon where they pay a couple dollars a month to see exclusive comics. So that's one thing that you can do if you already have like a platform going. The favorite book I wrote, I would say Dear Dad. I think it's the best one I've written. I think it's the most meaningful one I've written so far. And then if you're asking about funniest, I would say A Journey to Perfect Teeth. All right. Where to print books at low cost but good quality? If you're printing a small amount of books, I would just say Amazon, because I can't really think of any other manufacturers they can print at cheaper rates. I would say Lulu is also pretty good if you want to print books quickly. But for Dear Dad, because I'm selling it in a huge batch, I contacted a printing company in China because they make things a lot cheaper than here in the US. So if you make that many, not saying that, you know, that's a huge scale production. So when you have that many, the cost is much, much lower. So if you want to print, you know, more of these, that's what I would suggest.
Alan，不好意思，我打断一下啊，因为我刚刚看到 chat 里面有家长，也可能是小朋友在问说，你能不能给我们大家讲一下《Dear Dad》这本书背后的故事，然后读几页给我们大家看一下，好不好？
Oh yeah,
或者
sure.
你可以给我们看一下。
Yeah. So, Dear Dad, as I said earlier, this book is dedicated to my dad. All right. So I'll read the first couple pages, if you don't mind. And then I can show you the illustrations as well. I can't see it from here. Okay. Dear Dad, today I found the birthday gifts you prepared for me 3 years ago. I have to say, you are really good at hiding things. I also read, oh, okay, I'll just read it like this. I also read the letter you wrote me. I know it's just a birthday thing, but honestly, I wish we wrote more often so that I have some more memories to hold on to now. Now that you're gone, the world is a bit emptier and a bit more intimidating. But I'll be brave. That's what you always told me. I actually had a wish list for that birthday. The first wish was to take a good picture with you, even though you don't like photos. There were some other ones too, like trying the restaurant we kept hearing about and going camping together. I used to think that we'd have lots of time together down the road, but it seems like fate had other plans. Remember the day we watched Coco together? There was one line that stuck with me. When there's no one left in the living world who remembers you, you disappear from this world. We call it the final death. I think about you all the time, Dad. I hope the final death never happens. All right, so that's the first 2 pages of this book. I can also read you the afterword. So that's the final thing that comes out this book. And it kind of gives you like an idea of what the book is like. So, dear reader, if you are a dad, congratulations. Your children are lucky to have you.
Congratulations.
If you have a dad, treasure your time with him because we don't always cherish the good times until they're gone. If you lost your dad, I hope Alex's letter helped. The little yellow person on the front is yellow, Alex. I chose to have Alex narrate the story for a few reasons. Alex has no ethnicity, gender, or age. No matter who you are, I hope that you can see some similarities between Alex's story and yours. Maybe it helped you reminisce about the golden memories you shared with your dad. Or maybe it gave you the courage to brave the world without him by your side. Either way, Alex is honored to have walked this short journey with you. I wove some traces of my own story into Alex's letter. My dad passed away 2 months before my 15th birthday. Now, 3 years later, I'm 2 months away from adulthood. Just like the way Alex is moving to a new town, I'm preparing to step into a new chapter of my life. Moving forward is exhilarating, but I'm also scared of losing the things that I have to leave behind. So I sat down one night and began to write this book. Do not dwell in the past. Take the good memories with you into a better future. My dad always used to tell me this when I was sad. I hope it helps you now. Yours truly, Ellen. So that's the afterword for Dear Dad. Of course, there's a lot of stuff that I didn't get to. That's actually in this picture book, but I hope you enjoyed it. So again, I had on the screen earlier, like the Amazon link and the group buy information. So if you're interested in getting this book, then that's definitely the way to go. All right, so now after that short interlude, we'll go on to answering some more questions. There will be a post on English with Ellen that summarizes the contents of this presentation. If you know somebody who wasn't able to come, you can share that with them. And then the rough cost of publishing hard copies, it really varies with how many you're making. As I said before, if you're doing Amazon, so Amazon does something called print on demand. So whenever someone buys one, then they make one. That's why it says on demand. So since you're making one at a time, it's going to be a lot more expensive. I think that the cost for a hardcover is around $6 to $7. I believe. Right, and then how did I get into writing? I think is just when I mentioned earlier that I started writing at a very young age, like the Weibo blogs. That's how I really started getting into it. It's not to say that I had like a whole ton of inspiration for the blogs, because now that I look at them, the contents are pretty boring, but it's really a way that like made me exercise my writing skills more. And also a lot of reading made me really interested in world building. So world building is just like building a world. Like in Harry Potter, Hogwarts is a part of world building. And I found that really interesting. It's just personally, I really like making up these like little fantasies. So that's why you'll also see me writing a lot of sci-fi and fantasy stuff, because I just really enjoy making up these fiction worlds. For Lulu, you don't have to pay anything for publishing, unlike Ingram Spark. So Ingram Spark costs $50 to publish each book, but Lulu doesn't cost anything. Does the book need to get approval before publication? I don't think they have to approve your contents very much. I'm sure there's some kind of process to make sure like you're not publishing illegal stuff, but the main part of the approval process is just they're making sure that you have the right bleed, so nothing on your book like goes over, so that you know when they actually print your stuff, it doesn't get cut off. So that's the main approval. They will show you the format that you're supposed to use, so like how much extra space you need to leave on the edge, so you don't have to worry about figuring that out yourself. Does the PowerPoint make the resolution low? That's a good question. I don't think it does. My drawings, yeah, they look pretty much the same as I had on the on Procreate. Webtoon, I haven't used Webtoon before, but if you're interested in publishing your own comics, maybe you could check that out. Right. The names of the apps I mentioned are in the chat, so hopefully you can find them. There's somebody posting a lot of stuff in there. Yeah. Yeah, and if you want to check them after this session is over, then you can also go to my WeChat, English with Ellen. Everything will be posted there. So on so that's from November 20th, because I've also done this a couple times before. All right, and then the recording will also. There are some links in the blog that I mentioned that will lead you to the recording, so you can also get it there. Any minimum amount of hard copies required by Barnes & Nobles if you're interested in selling your book? If you want to sell hard copies of your book at Barnes & Nobles, it's a lot more complicated process. It's very easy to get your book on their website. You just have to go through Ingram Spark, then it will be on their website. But I've asked them about like getting my book into their bookstores, so like physical copies. It's much more difficult. You have to wait 4 to 6 weeks. You just have to like email a specific person that they mention on their website, and you have to wait 4 to 6 weeks to hear back from that person. There's a whole process that goes with it. I haven't dug super deep into that before, but essentially your book has to fit a certain amount of requirements. They have to know who your distributor is, so that they can, actually get the copies of your books. It's much, much more complicated than getting on their website. If you're interested in it, I would recommend looking at their website or going to a store and asking their affiliates. All right. If you're using Ingram Spark, they handle it. You don't have to worry about anything, but hard copies are harder. AP classes are easy. Some of them are harder. Drawings do not look good after I scan them. Do you need a professional to edit them? I've never used a professional before. If you're drawing them on paper and then you use a scanner to scan them, then the color can be a little bit affected. Something that I use is called Cam Scanner. That's also mentioned in the blog, I'm pretty sure. So if you use Cam Scanner to scan your document, then there's an option I think called Magic Color that restores the color of your drawings. So if that works for you, then you can try that. If it doesn't, then what I did was edit the picture on my phone. Like I use an iPhone, so there's some settings like brightness, contrast, saturation. So that's what I use. But if that still doesn't work for you, then I would suggest, yeah, a professional editor. But if my book is 300 pages, if your book is really, really long, then you would have to definitely make your spine thicker. But yeah, generally the process would stay the same. Just if you have a thicker book, then you definitely need a spine. You can't just like staple everything together. Who's my favorite author? Celeste New, who wrote Everything I Never Told You and Little Fires Everywhere. Can you access the video recording? Yes, if you go to the blog from November 20th on my WeChat blog. How did I learn writing? I would say it's mainly through reading books. And there's also something called Readsy blog. It's not written by professional authors, I don't think, but Readsy blog is basically a blog where there's like a little contest prompt every week. It's called Readsy prompts, I think. Okay, I don't think I can do it for some reason, but Readsy blog has regular contests every week, and they have super fun prompts. Like if you got cloned 10 times, what would you say to yourself? Or, you know, fun prompts like that. And a lot of people write for these contests, and I go on there sometimes just to read the entries that won, because I think that they give me a lot of inspiration for the stuff that I write. So that's like a blog for shorter stories if you're interested in reading these. And then the other writing inspiration I got was just from reading the books that I mentioned before.
刚才有家长问呢，就是说你里面提到的那些软件啊，用到的那些网站啊，是不是在你的公众号的那篇文章里面已经都有写到了？
对。
好的，那我就是请大家我刚把那个链接放到 chat 里面了啊，家长们可以看一下。English with Alan 它的里面有篇文章呢，是介绍到讲座里面提到的软件和出版网站。还有一位家长问了一下，说有没有你知道UK 的 publication 有关的一些内容吗？ Any suggestions?
I don't know anything about the UK. I mostly publish my stuff in the US, so that's where I'm most familiar. Okay. Let's see. Okay, I think one thing that's pretty universal is Amazon. It doesn't matter where you are. I don't know if it's the same for China, but I know like for a lot of countries, Amazon KDP works just fine. Of my other book, Learning English with Cartoons, I don't believe I have it at the moment. I mean, this is the cover of my planner, which is the same as the Learn English with Cartoons, but I don't think I have the actual book with me right now.
有一个小朋友的问题是my drawing do not look good after I scan them. Do I need a professional person to edit them? For example, tune the color and make the picture sharper.
Yeah, I answered that a bit earlier. If you didn't catch it, I said that if you can use an app called Cam Scanner. So that's something that you can download on your phone. You just take a picture of what you drew, if it's on paper. Then there's an option called Magic Color that you can use to restore the original like brightness and saturation of your image. And if you aren't satisfied with your drawing itself, then you can also get a professional editor, I would say. Like that's something that you can do. What are the themes of my books?
Alan， 我不好意思啊，我要跟各位参加今天讲座的朋友们说一下呢，我们接下来的这个10分钟的时间呢，就是大家最后的互动的机会啊。那我现在呢会再开一个调查问卷，就是调查一下今天来参加讲座的朋友们，你们是从什么渠道了解到我们的活动？然后呢，您是学生还是家长？好，请大家呢来填一下我们的调查问卷，然后我们请 Alan 继续跟大家来分享。
Yeah, so if you, I'm getting a lot of questions. So if your question doesn't get answered, I'm just like going down in order. If it doesn't get answered, you can also, like there's more information on my blog. Again, there's like a group you can join. You can talk to me there if you have any other questions. So yeah, there's that. Do you think a child can figure out how to publish a book by themselves, or does the parent needs to get involved? I think that there's just so much work involved in it for the first time, at least. After that, you kind of you get more familiar with it. But I think that there's just so much technical stuff that I would recommend if your child is very young, having a parent with them just to like help them out with everything. Especially the formatting of the books is very, very tedious. If you draw by hand, yes, if you draw by hand, then you can again use a scanner. I use Cam Scanner. You can use whatever you like. I take a picture with it with my phone, and then it scans the thing that you draw, and then you can export that as a picture and then upload it to your computer.
Alan， 你可以写一下那个 Cam Scanner 在 chat 里面吗？好像有的同学他们没有听清楚。
Okay, so right, so Cam Scanner is, I found it on the App Store. I don't know how it works for other systems, but yeah, that's Cam Scanner. Okay, here it is. When you draw on Procreate to use an Apple Pencil, yeah, I use the Generation 1 Apple Pencil, I believe. I don't know how the Gen 2 is different apart from it's more expensive, but this is what I use. I also lost the cap on the end. What AP classes are you taking? Very many. There's like chemistry, physics C, biology, the whatever comes after calculus BC. I take a lot of STEM APs, which is kind of weird, I think, for someone who's so into writing and drawing. I definitely should not have taken this many.
Alan 还剩最后几分钟，我来挑几个问题吧。我看到这边有一些家长的问的问题比较的特别一点啊。有一位家长他问说 ，How do I encourage my kids to 6 years old to write a story？ 还有一位家长问 ，Which language do you feel is harder to master, Chinese or English？ 我觉得今天就是你的学习外语的两种语言都学习的非常好，这个经历呢，可能还可以再跟我们大家再多分享一点，好不好？
Yeah, so I think that for the language question, I think that Chinese is definitely harder than English. I definitely spent a lot more time in China than I did in the US, like maybe it's like 12 compared to 6. But yeah, I think that because I grew up in a Chinese speaking environment, I'm able to speak it so well, but just I think the grammar is harder to understand than English. And also, of course, like writing the characters one by one is also requires more memory than just spelling the words in English. At least that's what I feel like, because I already speak English better than Chinese now after like 4 years in the US, even though, you know, I spoke Chinese for so long before I came to the US. So, you know, my Chinese is like 初中水平, but yeah, I think that Chinese is harder to master. So you definitely, if you want to learn any language well, but I think especially for Chinese, you need to be like in those environments to be able to, you know, speak it well and also read a lot, definitely to write it well. How to make your kid interested in writing. I would say if your kid is really, really young, then read a lot with them. I remember my parents used to read with me a lot when I was young. So that's definitely like helped me, you know, learn all these things about world building and what's unique about creative writing. So that's how I got interested in writing. But I think ultimately, oh yeah, and here's the really, really old, it's like 10 years old, the thing that I drew for my PBS Writers Contest. Yeah, it's falling apart. But I think that's how I developed my interest ultimately. Then if you really like arts and crafts, I made this book myself by hand, just with like cardboard and paper. So, you know, if your kid is interested in writing their own book, but maybe not really to professionally publish it yet, you can also like make this book with them through arts and crafts. Right. If they're okay, I can answer a couple more like very quick questions. 出版校对部分. I didn't hire a professional editor to format my books. I just did it myself. So on PowerPoint, if you make a text box, so that's where I type all the text from my books, there's an option on the right that you can select like exactly down to the millimeters, how far do you want it to be from the left? How far do you want it to be from the right? So that helps you like really keep the text box in the same place. So if that's the formatting, but if you want to check stuff like your contents and grammar, I would suggest Grammarly. But yeah, or if you want to, be more professional, then you can also hire someone, but I didn't do any. So I wouldn't know too much about it, sorry. Website that I mentioned is called Read-C Blog. So yeah, Read-C Blog gives you interesting prompts. You can enter their contest if you want. I think it's like a $50 prize if you win the contest. It's just like a community vote thing. They write short stories. How to win a writing contest? Mean what you write, I would say. I don't think I've ever won something by like writing fake stuff, especially for nonfiction. I think people can tell like whether you really, really mean something that you write. Apart from that, submit on time. Do not wait until 11:59. Is it easy for 10-year-olds to start learning Chinese? I would say it's a bit harder when you start later, but I think before like maybe the age of 12, you will still learn significantly easier. Like I started French after 12, and I think it's a lot harder for me to learn it as a native language than compared to English, which I started before. Drawing, hand drawing, or app drawing. There are lots of YouTube tutorials that teach you like how to draw, which I think are pretty good if you don't want to go to classes like me. So I just like find a YouTube video and watch at double speed. But it's definitely not as professional as like finding an actual teacher. Oh, if you write a novel without any drawings, I think you do have to upload it as a PDF. It is the same procedure. You just upload it as a PDF to the KDP portal. If you're young, does your grammar matter? If you're publishing this book professionally, you probably do want to check your grammar like multiple times. There were many times when I thought my grammar was right, but then I had like professionals take a look at it, and they were like, no, this thing is wrong. For example, it could be like a super small error, like onto, whether it's one word or two words. Like very small errors, even like as small as they are, you should still definitely check them. Share my classes that I'll be teaching in the spring. There should be, if you scroll really far back on my blog, there should be some posts about this class from a few years ago. It's called Out Loud, if that helps you search it. I think it has a pretty detailed schedule on exactly what I teach. It's just public speaking and writing. How long are my books? A Journey to Perfect Teeth is 67 pages. Each page has like one sentence on it. So yeah, that's also a book that you can definitely get if you have younger kids who are like, who don't want to brush their teeth, or kids who are about to get braces. I think that's good for them. Thank you. I'm glad I helped you. Yeah, and then if you want like any additional information, most likely they'll be on my blog. If you can't find them, then you can join a group that's linked on my blog. Then you'll be able to ask more detailed stuff in the group. Do we have any other questions? How many books did I write? In total, I wrote 9, not counting the low content stuff. But I believe that the actual stuff with different contents, I had 5 books. So there's A Journey to Perfect Teeth, Dear Dad. There's Made For, which I didn't really talk about because we don't have it in Chinese. It's just like a bunch of poems that I wrote when I was 12. I have like 15 of them, so I put them together into a book. That's 3. What else? An Alien's Guide to Friendship and English for Cartoons. Yeah, but combined with translations, because I had a couple books with Chinese translations and one with French, so overall it adds up to 9. All right. And then after you upload your thing to finally publishing, it really varies. On Amazon, it takes not super long, maybe 2 days. On Ingram Spark, it used to take longer. Sometimes it wouldn't come back for like 5 days or a week, but it really varies. I don't know exactly who is looking at these things or if it's machine approved, but yeah, I would say anywhere from like 2 days to a week. What was submitting to Scholastic like? Was it difficult? Did Scholastic publish my stuff? I don't know what it means by difficult. I guess if the writing process is difficult, then sometimes, yes, I did hit bottlenecks, but usually I just like go to bed and then wake up the next morning. Then I'll have like some new ideas. I also do recommend starting earlier because there are some times where I finish writing something and I think this is so awesome. And I look at it the next day and be like, this is disgusting. And I have to change the whole thing. So that's the writing process, but submitting itself is not difficult. You don't have to fill out like a whole bunch of forms or anything. And basically just pay and submit. Is grammar fun or is it annoying? I'd say it's kind of just there. I don't really think anything about it. When do I 什么时候再用汉语做一场讲座? Yeah, I did do the same presentation in Chinese a few weeks ago. So if you want to see that recording, you can also, again, everything is on my blog. You can there's a link on my blog that takes you to a WeChat group where you can ask for the recording. So that one will be in Chinese.
问说这个讲座之后的视频在哪里可以看到啊？我想给大家分享一下。小枇杷呢，我们一直都在做这个各种各样的讲座，所以在我们的 YouTube channel， 请大家关注一下啊，在小枇杷 YouTube channel Pipa Chinese。在这个上面呢，你可以看到我们过往的很多讲座。那么 Alan 的讲座，等我们的今天的录像剪辑好了之后呢，我们也会上传到这个上面。上面有很多各个方面的大咖的各种讲座，我们以后还会继续开这样的讲座，所以呢，欢迎大家关注我们小枇杷。我们这里是我们的小枇杷的公众号，大家如果扫一下小枇杷的微信公众号的话呢，你可以在这里面第一时间获得我们的讲座教育各方面的资讯。另外呢，我们的云课堂的小客服呢，也是随时恭候大家的咨询，可以了解我们的云课堂的中文课。好，那我们今天的这个讲座呢，就到这里，非常感谢 Alan 给大家带来的精彩的分享。Alan， 你还有什么要说吗？
就是如果大家还有问题的话，可以在我公众号上留言，我会就是回复的。如果有其他问题的话，就这些。
好的，好的，
谢谢。
好，谢谢大家，谢谢大家，谢谢 Alan，
谢谢，拜。